Hello, everybody. My name is Sashko, and I am one of the cultural consultants and one of the actors involved in this year's Criminal Queerness Festival at Lincoln Center. If you have not been around and this is your first time participating with us, welcome. This is the fifth iteration of the festival, of the annual festival. And this is a festival that focuses on giving voices to artists that would be censored in their countries. This year, we are focused on Ukrainian and Polish artists because during this awful conflict in Ukraine, during the full-scale invasion, during this genocide, we wanted to make sure that we give power and voice to the artists that have been impacted, and also to shine a light and say that if Russia were to win this war, then there would be major censorship in Ukraine and in Poland. And so this is a very important year for us. Myself, I am a queer Ukrainian artist. I'm based in New York City, and it has been an absolute honor to work on this festival. And by the way, of course, we have to mention that this festival is run by the National Queer Theater. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to give them a follow, subscribe, and join the festival, because the festival is running from June 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, right before all the festivities of this weekend's Pride. So if you're in New York City, come on through Lincoln Center. It is completely free of charge, part of their summer series stages programs. And today, we have a very exciting panel for you. I'm joined by Lenny Emson, one of the founders of Kyiv Pride, and Ruslana Hnatchenko from Kharkiv Pride. Hello, you two. What a pleasure and a delight to be in the same room with you. Thank you for everything that you do. I think a lot of the people who will be watching this panel, they have a lot of questions about what's happening in Ukraine as far as the LGBTQ community right now. So I want to start off by giving you a moment. Maybe Lenny, you can introduce yourself really quick, and then Ruslana, you can introduce yourself really quick, just to let people know who you are and your involvement.
Thank you, Sashko. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me to speak today, because as an expert on the regional situation and LGBTQ movement in Ukraine, as a person that has been involved with Kyiv Pride and other LGBTQ organizations in Ukraine for years, right, I see that the moment we are surviving today is a crucial moment for the whole movement in Ukraine. And LGBTQI community today is going through the times that will define the future for the whole movement and for the community.
Thank you so much. Ruslana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ruslana, and I am a fundraising manager at Kharkiv Pride Sphere organization. We are from Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine, based in the east, just 50 kilometers away from the Russian border. So Kharkiv was one of the first cities hit by the invasion, and the local queer community there has really gone through a lot of difficult times, and it's an honor for me to represent the organization. I am a feminist and an ally. I'm not a member of the community, but I take deep pride in helping the community, and it's very important for me to keep supporting the movement in Ukraine, because the fight for equal rights doesn't stop at women's rights or animal rights or elders' rights. It includes the very crucial part of the LGBTQ community, who are my friends and, frankly, my family after all these years of working with Kharkiv Pride.
Thank you so much. And myself, I am from Kharkiv, so it's nice to have, you know, a representative from Kharkiv as well. And Kyiv has been the center of the movement since the very beginning. So it really is very exciting to start this conversation. So Lenny, let me go straight to you. I think a lot of people during this war are quite sheltered because, and I'm not saying Ukrainians, I'm saying people outside of Ukraine, the world. A lot of folks are sheltered because they're looking at the conflict, at the war through their screens. They're looking at news networks, publications. So they might not understand fully and not even have the resources really to understand fully what is the experience of the LGBTQ community in Ukraine. So could you provide a window of realities into the Ukrainian LGBTQ experience during war?
So, of course, as a community, LGBTQI people try to survive right now individually and as a community. And in this difficult situation, community members trying to go through this survival game, as I would say, right? And it is very difficult right now because the economical situation is not easy, and people have no money for food, people have no money for medications, people are surviving on the edge, right? And on top of that, of course, people are really living in fear of being killed every day. So this is the situation that you cannot actually show through the screen, right? You cannot actually tell anyone about it because many are really silent today. It's a huge mental health trauma for many people to live with this danger, with this fear every day. And, as a community, LGBTQI people try to stay together, and LGBTQI people try to survive, helping each other. Many LGBTQI organizations in Ukraine, like Kyiv Pride, like Kharkiv Pride, like Prides in Odessa and other cities of Ukraine, right, are trying to help the community today and trying to support people in this surviving world, right? And with that, we see that the community became stronger. So in my personal opinion, since the invasion started on 24th of February last year, we see that LGBTQI community in Ukraine became even more visible, stronger, and more, I would say, powerful, not only in social sense, but in political sense. And right now, the community in Ukraine is advocating for equal rights in sense of marriage for same-sex couples, right? So I think this is just amazing that in the middle of the war, in the middle of the biggest, I would say, disaster for the last years since World War II, right? In Ukraine, Ukrainian LGBTQI community is still fighting and is still standing up for equal rights and for human rights.
Yeah, I think it's been so inspiring for me as someone in the diaspora, a queer Ukrainian, looking at my community back in Ukraine. It really is this kind of drive that I think we don't see as often across the world anymore. And to see the community fighting tooth and nail for their rights is really, really, really inspiring. Now, you mentioned the same-sex civil union law that's currently in the Rada. I don't hear very often, this is just a follow-up to that, I don't hear enough international attention to it right now. Do you think that it would influence the Ukrainian politicians if the international community were to start talking about this and the necessity of the same-sex civil unions in Ukraine?
So, of course, for the Ukrainian LGBTQ community, the main point of advocacy in terms of international support would be European Union institutions, right, and European Parliament, right? So, in these terms, of course, all the advocating tools are kind of directed in these points, right? And, for example, Kyiv Pride right now calls people all over the Europe, right, to stand up and march with the prides in Europe to remind local communities and local politicians that Ukraine is still there and LGBTQI community in Ukraine is still there and that we need this political support, right? So this is kind of the advocacy that we are applying right now. And this is the mechanism that is helping us through the LGBTQI community in international contexts, reach out to the politicians and call them to put a pressure on Ukrainian government. And this is very important because today, as you know, Ukraine is getting ready to join the European Union, right? And of course, in order to join this huge regional unity, right? Ukraine needs to implement some human rights and to follow some guidance from the European Union. And this would be a great advocating advantage for us.
Thank you. Ruslana, I feel like during wartime, there is always, of course, minorities get the brunt of the stick. There's a lot of, usually minorities are forgotten about during wartime, which is very sad. And there's a lot of myths that start coming about minority groups. So as far as LGBTQ people in Ukraine, could you dispel some of the myths when it comes to, like a popular one that I've heard? I'm not going to say it's popular, but it's a popular myth, is that the LGBTQ community is not doing anything during this war, just kind of sitting around and waiting for it to be over. But you and I know this is far from the truth. So could you take a moment to kind of dispel this, especially with a lot of the boots on the ground work you guys have been doing?
Yes, Sasha, you're very right with the fact that a lot of the times the minorities got this short part of the stick, so to say, during the war. And unfortunately, there have been opponents of the equal rights movement for years in Ukraine, and they're still very vocal to create those myths and to undermine the popular support for the equal rights movement in Ukraine. So as you say, probably the most popular myth is the fact that they say, oh, everyone from the LGBTQ community has left Ukraine. They all left, they're all abroad, they're all just sitting there and waiting for the war to be over. They're not doing anything, they're not contributing to the Ukrainian victory and to the Ukrainian state. Therefore, they're useless for the country, basically. This is very far from the reality. That's what's happening in Ukraine. From the very first days of this full-scale war, I would say even prior, the community has been participating in various activities. For example, in Kharkiv, I think about 10 days before the full-scale invasion, we had the march for unity and for like Ukrainian unity, where a lot of people from the community, also we as an organization participated. We were all holding like national symbols, national ideas to show that we show resistance to, at that point, still not yet the Russian invasion, but the possibility of it. So already prior to the war, this was that. It was there. And of course, since the war has started, the LGBT community took a lot of different ways. It utilized a lot of different ways to help Ukraine win. First of all, of course, is to join the armed forces of Ukraine, that many members of the community opted to do. One of her own, she's a co-organizer of Kharkiv Pride. She was for a number of years, Anya. She joined the armed forces last summer. Also, there are many members of the community who are openly queer, and there are many more who are closeted. at this point. And of course, you might have heard about the organizations that are there, for example, the LGBTQ military for equal rights in Ukraine, that are, openly queer soldiers who are fighting in the armed forces. Also, I want to really emphasize the role of other actors who are there, such as queer people who are volunteering at the front in the civilian positions, like translators, or working at different offices, or working with documents, as well as volunteering at the areas close to the front line, helping people there, bringing humanitarian aid. All those kind of roles are important, and queer people also take part in those activities, of course. And the strength of the community is always to help each other. So of course, many organizations, they target the members of the community to help them to alleviate their struggles and to help them, receive basic necessities, or find a job again, or get some necessary skills to be able to, continue study or employment, or get, help with their health. And this is something that I think where the community grew a lot. It's like the solidarity and this kind of community cohesion is very strong these days in organizations and in separate regions, and also I would say all over Ukraine as well.
That's great. And I think a great segue as well to, you're talking about the community growth and community coming together. And Lenny, you already started talking about these societal shifts that you're starting to witness during wartime. So what are the specific, Lenny, social shifts you've observed since the start of the full-scale invasion? And is there movement towards equal rights, and what is in the way? I know you started talking about the same-sex civil unions, but is there even more that's happening maybe behind the scenes that we might not be seeing?
Well, so the surveys show that actually a societal attitude towards LGBTQI people in Ukraine is slightly but better right now than it was before. So the last survey was presented last year, right, in 2022, and the data were compared with the same data from 2016, right, and we saw that the attitude towards LGBTQI people really improved itself, right? So, and I think, this is the result of the continuous work that LGBTQI organizations in Ukraine actually provide to influence the societal attitude, to be visible in a society, and to be visible outside Ukraine as well. So this is a very important work that LGBTQI organizations in Ukraine, and there are many of them, right? And probably, in every big city in Ukraine, and every even, regional center would have LGBTQI initiative or LGBTQ organization working to mobilize the community, to help the community, to make the community visible. And this work year by year made the LGBTQI movement in Ukraine probably the most organized among other human rights movements in Ukraine, the most organized and the most visible, right? And the National LGBTQI Conference of Ukraine will be actually taking place this year in November, right? And it will be the 16th conference, right? So, and it's a huge event that gathers together all the organizations and the most prominent activists from different regions of Ukraine, right? And gives people a platform to exchange the experiences, right? To express the thoughts and observations, and to kind of draw the roadmap. What are we doing now? and how we're moving forward. And for the last few years, national conferences were attended by the politicians, by Ukrainian MPs, right, and representatives of the government, of the ministries, right. So, and I think this is a very good sign that LGBTQI movement in Ukraine for the last 30 years, starting from 1991, achieved great results, right? And I don't think that anything could stop us right now, right? And I think that, you know, this invasion, this Russian aggression that is happening right now is not stopping LGBTQI movement in Ukraine. It really makes us stronger. We're just united to fight.
What a great soundbite, you know, like I can use that. I'm gonna play it, you know, like when I need some hope and fire in my spirit, you know, I'll play that little soundbite of Lenny saying that we cannot be stopped. That's great. And so as we continue talking about these societal changes, right, that is the huge focus of the organizations, you know, from Kyiv Pride, Kharkiv Pride. Ruslana, has wartime kind of made you and made the organization have to put like a painful pause on a lot of the societal work that you've been doing to give priority to repelling the invaders, repelling the occupiers from the land?
Yeah, I would say that the war has brought some necessary changes into our activities, some of the areas of the work that we have given a lot of effort last year. For example, a lot of humanitarian work that we did, helping the community and working with the community. Also, we started last year kind of restoring our volunteers activity and volunteers engagement, because this is one of the core activities that our organization focuses on in our daily work, because without a strong volunteer movement, you cannot really build, you know, the LGBTQI movement in the city. If there's only just a few people in the organization working on it, you need, you know, a lot of volunteers, a wide network of motivated individuals who are, you know, who can help you build really pride and the movement in the city. So we have focused on that, but we have been working with public opinion, and we implemented informational campaigns last year, and we also even held Kharkiv Pride 2023. Sorry, 2022. We aren't going to have the 2023 a little announcement, but we held the 2022 last year. It was, of course, very reformative, nothing like what we did in the previous years. Very interestingly,
But where was it? You have to tell the people where.
Yes, I am going to. Yes,
Okay,
very interestingly, the COVID experience helped us in organizing that, because we already reformatted our 2020 Pride into an automotor Pride with just a runway of cars, with rainbow symbols and other LGBTQI symbols. But for the last year's Pride, we had a march in the subway, because subway is the shelter of the city, is one of the most protected areas where you can be at any time, basically, when you're in Kharkiv. So we thought that this would be a good idea to show that, you know, even that place needs some pride.
right.
We also, of course, held other activities more, you know, meaningful and impactful for our local community. For example, we had a commemoration day during the strike on the regional administration in the beginning of March. One of our own volunteers and an activist in our organization, and she also was an activist in general in Ukraine. She visited many prides, Kyiv Pride as well. Elvira Shimor, she died in that strike, and some other members of the community who also passed away, some of whom we know, some whom we don't know, but, you know, the community fights in this war, and the community unfortunately dies in this war as well. So we needed to have those events to also have some time to commemorate our losses, but we also had some more, you know, inspiring events as well. And yes, some of the activities we needed to reform it or put on hold, or let's say have necessary changes in them. But as Lenny said, the movement is very strong these days, and we need to capitalize on those gains. We need to continue fighting and continue to go on. So yeah, we're not planning to stop.
No, ma'am. I can't even tell you what it did for me to see Ukrainians in Kharkiv, in my city, still holding pride undercover in the stations. That if that's not what at the core what pride means and should mean for everyone, I don't know what is. That was truly, I hope that the entire country was proud of Kharkiv for holding their own. So since we began talking a little bit about the occupiers and having to pause some of the programming because of that, a big reason for Kremlin's invasion has been using the LGBTQ community in Ukraine, saying that is one of the reasons why they're coming to quote unquote liberate the country. Oof, that even saying that is very deeply emotional for me. But could you talk about the damage of using the LGBTQ community as a scapegoat for genocide?
Yeah, this is immensely damaging for the community. It, of course, in some people in Ukraine, it can create a sense that there are some enemies, in your own country that you need to fight, rather than focus all of your attention, all of your efforts on repelling the invaders that are coming from the outside. And also this is something damaging for us on the international level, I would say, that's to be deemed something that needs to be eradicated from Ukraine, that, the LGBT community should be dealt with, so to say. And when he was naming all of these groups that Ukraine needs to be liberated from, that he was putting the LGBTQ community within the ranks of, many different groups, which kind of shifts the blame onto us rather than onto the Russians. And for, maybe some of the international community of more conservative countries, they could say, well, we could probably get behind this kind of agenda because that does not align with our values. So that seems that they're doing something good. But this is extremely damaging, and but I feel like in Ukraine, not many people really bought the narrative. Luckily, at least in our understanding, and also in my personal opinion, that was an ideologically weak point that they brought up, and I feel like the society managed to withstand its kind of propaganda and didn't buy in. So.
Love that. I love to hear that. Thank you. Lenny, we've already started talking about, support, international support right now, especially with the same-sex civil union bill that's on the table being discussed in the Ukrainian Rada. But let's talk about what can the international community, there's viewers right now watching this panel, what can they do to support stability and sustainability of the Ukrainian LGBTQ community? How can we help the endurance during wartime? Because even past a victory, we will need to rebuild. So what can be done on the international level?
So the international community really made me personally feel that LGBTQI community all over the world, we're united, we're together, and we exist as a community. Because the help that the international community provided to Ukrainians was tremendous, right? And this support, especially from the Pride community, in Europe, in Northern America, right, and other countries of the world, right, it was remarkable, right? Last year, for example, Kyiv Pride was marching together with Warsaw Pride in the capital of Poland. And we had 120,000 people joining this march to praise Ukrainian LGBTQI community, to support Ukrainian LGBTQI community, and to actually express this solidarity that is very much needed, right? And this year, Kyiv Pride called on ambassadors, so-called ambassadors, right, in kind of different countries of the world to join the Pride movement, right, and organize Ukrainian groups, organize Ukrainian presence within the Prides in all over the world, in Europe, in North America, other countries, right? So, and already by this time, we have over 30 Prides marching together with Ukrainians and supporting. So this is what you can do where you are. You can join the Ukrainian group, you can support Ukrainians, you can wave the Ukrainian flag, you can help Ukrainians to be visible, you can help Ukrainian LGBTQ community to be visible on this societal and political level. As I said before, this is a great advocacy tool. With that, we're visible, and with that, our political agenda is very visible. And now a political agenda number one would be civil unions for same-sex couples, right? So, and with that, we are achieving a greater visibility for the Ukrainian LGBTQI community. And of course, this solidarity helps Ukrainian LGBTQI community to actually remain a community as it is. So Ukrainian LGBTQI community feels that actually we are supported, our back is covered, and we can move on and keep going. You know, this is something that gives the community the power to survive. I mean, kind of this has a great psychological input and a great support that people have. You know, somebody really cares how are you, right? And how are you surviving? How are you going through the war? What are you doing? What do you need to survive? You know, that's a big thing, right? So that's why I'm calling like the whole international community to follow us, to follow Ukrainian LGBTQ organizations. Go on Kyiv Pride's, for example, or Kharkiv Pride's social media, right? Follow us. Leave comments, support people, give people this feeling that we are not alone in that, right? So, and this is what you can do where you are, and this is what you can do to support Ukrainian LGBTQI community, right? And of course, donate. Of course, don't forget that right now, we're still in the war, and we're still in the situation when many members of the community, and we must not forget that LGBTQI community was always the most marginalized among other social groups, right? And still, LGBTQI people were the first to lose their jobs, the first to lose their money, and many LGBTQI community members today in Ukraine are on the edge of surviving. So, and LGBTQ organizations, almost all LGBTQ organizations in Ukraine are now providing humanitarian support for the community. So when you donate to community members.
Thank you. What an excellent way to wrap up this discussion. I'll be the first one to tell you that in New York City at the Queer Liberation March, Ukrainians will be present and marching. So we invite anyone who wants to come stand under the blue and yellow with us. And I think what a great way to mention too that you don't always need to donate. Donation is great, you know, but if somebody doesn't have the means to, we're not all privileged to have that means. If you don't have the means, it doesn't stop anyone from just going and publicly writing support on social media for queer Ukrainians. I think that is beautiful. Lenny, Ruslana, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day today. Thank you for being a part of our festival at the Criminal Queerness Festival at Lincoln Center. Thank you for everything that you do from the bottom of my heart as a queer Ukrainian. I have so much respect for you, and you inspire me so much. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'll end by saying, Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Slava.
Thank you.